The flames licked at the wooden beams of Abigail's cabin as Olivia Keller watched in horror, her throat raw from screaming for help that seemed would never come. It was 1878 in Concordia, Kansas, and the summer drought had turned the landscape into a tinderbox just waiting for a spark. That spark had come from her own kitchen stove, and now her home of 3 years was rapidly becoming her tomb. The smoke billowed thick and black, forcing Olivia to crawl on her hands and knees toward what she hoped was the door. Her lungs burned with each desperate breath, and tears streamed down her soot-stained face. At 24, she had survived the loss of her parents, a journey west from Boston, and the harsh realities of frontier life only to die alone in a fire of her own making. A thunderous crash sent splinters of burning wood flying around her. Olivia covered her head, certain the roof was finally collapsing. Instead, through the smoke and flames, she saw a tall silhouette charging toward her. "Hold on," a deep voice commanded. "I've got you." Strong arms scooped her up as easily as if she were a child. She caught only a glimpse of a determined face beneath the brim of a dusty Stetson before burying her face against a broad chest, away from the searing heat. The man turned and charged back through what remained of her front door, shielding her body with his own as burning debris fell around them. The cool evening air hit Olivia's lungs like a blessing as they cleared the porch, but her rescuer didn't stop until they were a safe distance from the inferno. When he finally set her down on the grass, Olivia looked up into the face of a man she'd seen around town but never properly met. Owen Farley, the cattle rancher who had bought Old Man Peterson's spread last year. His face was streaked with soot, his blue eyes intense as they examined her for injury. "Are you hurt, Miss Keller?" he asked, his voice rough with concern. "I don't think so," she managed between coughs. "How did you—" "I was riding back to my ranch when I saw the smoke." He glanced back at the burning cabin. "Too late to save the building, I'm afraid." Olivia followed his gaze and watched as the roof of her small home finally gave way with a terrible groan, sending sparks spiraling skyward like angry fireflies. Everything she owned was in that cabin, every memory, every possession, every hope for her future. "Oh God," she whispered, the full weight of her situation crashing down on her as her knees buckled. Owen caught her before she hit the ground. "Steady now," he said, his arm firm around her waist. "You're alive, and that's what matters." Neighbors were arriving now, men with buckets forming a line from the nearby creek, though it was clearly too late to save the structure. Women rushed forward with blankets and offers of shelter. "You can stay with us, Miss Keller," Martha Simmons said, wrapping a quilt around Olivia's shoulders. "Thank you," Olivia managed, though her eyes were fixed on the burning ruins of her life. The general store where she worked 6 days a week didn't pay enough for her to rebuild. What would she do now? "I need to help with the bucket line," Owen said, releasing her carefully to ensure she could stand on her own. "Will you be all right for a moment?" She nodded numbly, and he hurried to join the men fighting to keep the fire from spreading to the nearby trees. Even in her state of shock, Olivia couldn't help noticing the way he took charge, organizing the efforts with quiet authority. The night stretched endlessly as the townsfolk of Concordia fought the blaze and eventually contained it to the smoldering ruins of her cabin. Olivia sat wrapped in borrowed blankets on a neighbor's wagon, accepting cups of water and sympathetic pats on the shoulder. She felt hollow, emptied of everything but a dull sense of disbelief. As dawn broke across the horizon, Owen Farley approached her again. He'd washed his face, but his clothes still smelled of smoke, and there was a tear in his shirt sleeve where the fabric had caught fire. "The fire's out," he said, sitting beside her on the wagon bed. "I'm sorry we couldn't save anything." Olivia nodded, her throat too tight for words. "Do you have family nearby?" he asked gently. "No," she whispered. "My parents died on the journey west. I came to Concordia with my aunt 3 years ago, but she passed last winter. It's just me now." Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "I have a proposition for you, Miss Keller, if you'll hear it." She looked up at him questioningly. "My housekeeper left 2 weeks ago, got married, and moved to Topeka. My sister's been helping out, but she's returning to her husband in Wichita tomorrow. I need someone to cook and keep house at the ranch. He met her gaze directly. The job comes with room and board, and I can pay you fair wages. Better than what Hobson gives you at that store, I'd wager. Pride made her hesitate. I don't want charity, Mr. Farley. It's not charity. It's work, Miss Keller, hard work. I have 3 ranch hands who eat like wolves, and the house has been neglected since Mrs. Porter left. He stood and offered his hand. At least come see the place before you decide. Olivia looked around at the well-meaning neighbors who'd offered her temporary shelter. She knew their small homes were already crowded, and their charity would quickly become a burden. Owen Farley's offer meant independence, a chance to rebuild on her own terms. She placed her hand in his calloused palm and stood. Thank you, Mr. Farley. I accept. The ride to the Farley ranch took nearly an hour, with Olivia perched beside Owen on his wagon seat. He'd insisted on driving her himself, saying his ranch hands needed sleep after fighting the fire all night. The morning sun climbed higher, promising another scorching day as they followed the winding road out of Concordia. It's not much farther, Owen said, breaking a long silence. Just over that rise. Olivia nodded, still feeling dazed by how quickly her life had changed. Less than 12 hours ago, she'd been preparing a simple dinner in her own kitchen. Now, everything she owned was contained in a small bundle of borrowed clothes. I should warn you, he continued, the house isn't fancy. My father built it 30 years ago when this was all open range. I've been meaning to make improvements, but running the ranch keeps me busy. I'm sure it will be fine, she replied softly. I'm grateful for the opportunity, Mr. Farley. He glanced at her, his expression unreadable beneath his hat brim. Owen, he said. If you're going to be living on my ranch, you might as well use my given name. Then you should call me Olivia, she offered, feeling strangely shy. As they crested the rise, the Farley ranch spread out before them. A large meadow dotted with grazing cattle gave way to a cluster of buildings nestled against a backdrop of cottonwood trees. The main house was larger than Olivia had expected, a 2-story structure with a wide front porch and multiple chimneys. You have a beautiful home, she said, genuinely impressed. It needs a woman's touch, Owen replied, then seemed embarrassed by his own words. What I mean is, Mrs. Porter kept things running smoothly. Since she left, we've been barely managing. He guided the wagon to the front of the house and helped Olivia down, his hands strong and sure at her waist. The touch was brief, but sent an unexpected warmth through her exhausted body. I'll show you around, then you should rest, he said. You've been through a terrible ordeal. The interior of the house was indeed neglected, though the bones of it were good. Dishes were stacked unwashed in the kitchen sink, and dust had gathered on the furniture in the parlor. Still, Olivia could see the potential in the spacious rooms and solid craftsmanship. Your room would be upstairs, Owen said, leading her up a wide staircase. It gets the morning sun. The bedroom he showed her was simply furnished with a narrow bed, a chest of drawers, and a small desk beneath the window. The window itself looked out over the ranch, with the distant hills visible on the horizon. It's lovely, Olivia said, meaning it. After 3 years in her tiny cabin, this room felt luxurious. My sister left some clothes that might fit you, Owen said, gesturing to the chest of drawers. She's about your size. I'll have one of the hands bring up hot water so you can wash. Olivia felt tears welling in her eyes at this kindness. Thank you, she whispered. Owen looked uncomfortable with her emotion. Get some rest, he said gruffly. We can talk about your duties tomorrow. Left alone, Olivia sat on the edge of the bed and finally allowed the tears to come. She wept for her lost home, for the mementos of her parents that could never be replaced, for the uncertainty of her future. When the tears were spent, she washed with the hot water that was brought up by a young ranch hand who tipped his hat respectfully before leaving. Clean and dressed in a borrowed nightgown, Olivia slipped between the cool sheets and fell into an exhausted sleep, dreaming of flames and strong arms carrying her to safety. She awoke disoriented in the late afternoon, sunlight slanting through unfamiliar curtains. For a moment, panic seized her as she tried to remember where she was. Then it all came rushing back: the fire, the rescue, Owen Farley's offer. Rummaging through the chest of drawers, she found a simple blue dress that fit her well enough, though it was a bit loose in the waist. She pinned her long brown hair into a practical bun and went downstairs, determined to begin earning her keep immediately. The kitchen was empty, but evidence of a hasty meal littered the table. Olivia set to work washing dishes and tidying the space, finding comfort in the familiar tasks. She was searching the pantry for ingredients to prepare supper when she heard boots on the porch. Owen stepped into the kitchen, looking surprised to find her there. "You should be resting," he said. "I've rested enough," Olivia replied. "I wanted to start making myself useful." She gestured to the now clean kitchen. "I hope you don't mind." "Mind, it's a miracle," he said, a smile softening his weathered features. It transformed his face, making him appear younger than she'd first thought. Perhaps 30, not much older than her 24 years. "I was just inventorying your supplies," she continued. "You're low on flour and sugar, and there's hardly any coffee left." "I've been meaning to make a supply run into town," Owen admitted, removing his hat and hanging it on a peg by the door. "Things have been hectic since the spring drive." "I can prepare a list," Olivia offered. "And I noticed your garden out back is overgrown. With some attention, you could have fresh vegetables within a few weeks." Owen leaned against the doorframe, studying her with those intense blue eyes. "Mrs. Porter warned me when she left that I'd regret not finding a replacement right away. I didn't realize how right she was." Olivia felt her cheeks warm under his gaze. "Where are your ranch hands? I should know how many to cook for tonight." "Jake and Tom are out checking the north pasture fence. Hank's in the barn with a lame horse. They'll all be back by sundown, hungry as bears." "Then I'd better get started," Olivia said, turning back to the pantry. "Wait," Owen said, straightening. "I brought something for you." He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small leather pouch. "I rode into town while you were sleeping. The mercantile was taking up a collection for you. I added something myself." He handed her the pouch, which clinked with coins. "It's not much, but it should help you replace some of your things, clothes, personal items." Olivia stared at the pouch, overwhelmed by the generosity of people she barely knew. "I don't know what to say." "You don't need to say anything," Owen replied. "Concordia takes care of its own." That evening, Olivia served a simple but hearty meal to Owen and his 3 ranch hands. The men devoured her cooking with enthusiastic appreciation, making her feel immediately welcome. Jake and Tom were brothers in their early 20s, good-natured and full of stories. Hank was older, a weathered cowboy with a gray streaked beard who'd been with the Farley family for decades. "Miss Keller," Hank said, helping himself to a second serving of stew, "if you cook like this every night, we'll all be too fat to sit a horse by winter." "It's just Olivia," she corrected with a smile, "and thank you." "The boss was smart to snap you up," Jake added, casting a sly glance at Owen. "Half the single men in town would have offered you a position if he hadn't beat them to it." Owen shot his young ranch hand a warning look. "That's enough, Jake. Miss Keller has been through a terrible ordeal. The last thing she needs is to be made uncomfortable by your teasing." "It's all right," Olivia said quickly. "I appreciate the warm welcome." After supper, the men retired to the porch to smoke while Olivia cleaned up the kitchen. She could hear their low voices through the open window, discussing cattle prices and the condition of the pastures. There was something comforting about the rumble of male conversation, something she'd missed since her father's death. When she finished in the kitchen, Olivia hesitated, unsure of what was expected of her in the evenings. In her cabin, she would have read or mended by lamplight. Here, she felt awkward, caught between her status as an employee and the intimacy of living in someone else's home. The decision was made for her when Owen appeared in the doorway. "Would you care to join us on the porch? The evening's cooling down nicely." Olivia followed him outside, where Hank offered her his chair and perched instead on the porch railing. The evening air was indeed pleasant, with a gentle breeze carrying the scent of grass and distant rain. "Miss Keller, Olivia," Owen corrected himself, "was telling me she noticed the garden needs attention." "Been saying that myself," Hank nodded. "Good soil there, just needs tending." I enjoyed gardening at my cabin, Olivia said. It would be nice to have fresh vegetables again. Whatever you need for the garden, just let me know, Owen told her. I'll be making a supply run later this week. The conversation flowed easily as darkness fell, with the men sharing stories of life on the ranch. Olivia found herself laughing at Tom's tale of a particularly stubborn calf, feeling more relaxed than she had in months. The tragic events of the previous night seemed almost dreamlike in this peaceful setting. As the others drifted off to their bunks in the bunkhouse, Owen remained on the porch with Olivia. They sat in companionable silence for a few minutes, watching fireflies dance in the yard. "How are you really doing?" he asked finally, his voice gentle in the darkness. Olivia considered the question honestly. "I'm still in shock, I think. It doesn't seem real that everything is gone. Was there anything particularly valuable you lost, besides the obvious sentimental things, I mean?" She thought of the small wooden box that had contained her mother's cameo and her father's pocket watch. Nothing of monetary value, just memories. Owen nodded, understanding in his silence. After a moment, he spoke again. "I lost my parents too, though I was older than you were. Father 4 years ago, mother last year. It's strange being alone in the world, isn't it?" "Yes," Olivia agreed, surprised by his perception. "People mean well, but they don't understand unless they've experienced it." "Exactly." He stood and stretched, his tall frame silhouetted against the night sky. "We should both get some sleep. Tomorrow comes early on a ranch." "Good night, Owen," Olivia said, rising as well, "and thank you again for everything." He paused at the door, his expression hidden in shadow. "I'm glad I was riding by your cabin last night, Olivia, more glad than you know." The days settled into a rhythm at the Farley ranch. Olivia rose before dawn to prepare breakfast for Owen and the hands. She spent her mornings cleaning and organizing the neglected house, and her afternoons tending to the garden she'd reclaimed from weeds. Evenings were for cooking and conversation on the porch, weather permitting. A week after the fire, Owen drove her into Concordia to purchase necessities with the money from the collection. The townspeople greeted her warmly, expressing relief at her safety and approval of her position at the Farley ranch. "Owen Farley's a good man, Mrs. Thompson at the dress shop told her while measuring her for new garments. His father was respected all over Kansas, and Owen's cut from the same cloth. Hard-working, honest, treats his men fairly." "He's been very kind to me," Olivia agreed, feeling a blush rise to her cheeks at the older woman's knowing look. "Kind, is he?" Mrs. Thompson smiled as she pinned fabric. "Well, it's about time someone caught that young man's attention. He's been alone too long since his wife died." Olivia nearly dropped the bolt of fabric she was holding. "His wife, Sarah Farley, lovely girl from Wichita, died in childbirth 6 years ago along with the baby. Owen took it hard, threw himself into the ranch, and hasn't looked up since." Mrs. Thompson shook her head sadly. "Some thought he might sell up and move away, but the Farleys have been on that land for 3 generations. It's in his blood." Olivia was quiet on the ride back to the ranch, processing this new information. She'd had no idea Owen had suffered such a tragedy. It explained the sadness she sometimes glimpsed behind his smile, the way he held himself slightly apart even in company. "You're thoughtful," Owen observed as they bounced along the rutted road. "Did something happen in town?" Olivia hesitated, then decided honesty was best. "I heard about your wife," she said softly. "I'm sorry for your loss." Owen's hands tightened on the reins, but his voice remained steady. "Thank you, it was a long time ago." "Still," Olivia said, "I know grief doesn't simply disappear with time." He glanced at her, something like appreciation in his eyes. "No, it doesn't, but it changes, becomes more manageable." They rode in silence for a while, the only sounds the creak of the wagon and the steady clip-clop of the horses' hooves. "Sarah would have liked you," Owen said suddenly. "She was practical like you, saw what needed doing and did it without fuss." The comparison warmed Olivia unexpectedly. "Tell me about her," she invited, and to her surprise, he did. All the way back to the ranch, Owen spoke of Sarah, how they'd met at a harvest dance, her love of music, her dreams for their future. It was the most he'd ever shared with Olivia, and she sensed it had been a long time since he'd spoken of his wife to anyone. When they reached the ranch, Owen helped Olivia down from the wagon, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Their eyes met, and something passed between them, a recognition, perhaps, of shared loss and the possibility of new beginnings. The moment was broken by Jake calling from the corral, needing Owen's help with an unruly horse. Owen stepped back, touching the brim of his hat in a gesture that had become familiar. "Thank you for listening," he said simply, then turned to attend to his ranch hand's needs. Olivia carried her packages into the house, her mind full of Owen Farley and the complex man behind the stoic rancher facade. She had come to the ranch out of necessity, grateful for shelter and employment. Now she was finding herself increasingly drawn to its owner, a development as unexpected as it was unsettling. July melted into August, and the brutal Kansas heat shimmered across the ranch. Olivia's garden flourished under her careful attention, providing fresh vegetables for the table. The house, too, had transformed under her care, becoming the welcoming home it was meant to be. One evening, as she prepared supper, Owen entered the kitchen looking troubled. "Storm's coming," he announced. "A big one from the look of those clouds to the west." Olivia moved to the window and saw the dark thunderheads building on the horizon. "Will the cattle be all right?" "They should be. We moved the herd to the south pasture yesterday, away from the creek that floods, but I'm sending the boys to check the fencing anyway." He hesitated. "These summer storms can turn nasty quickly. If you hear me calling, come to the cellar right away." She nodded, understanding his concern. Plains storms were legendary for their ferocity. By the time they sat down to supper, the wind had picked up, rattling the windows. The ranch hands ate quickly and departed to secure the outbuildings, leaving Owen and Olivia alone in the house. "I should check the upstairs windows," Olivia said as she cleared the dishes. "Make sure they're all latched." "Good idea," Owen agreed. "I'll bring in more firewood." The temperature drops fast after these storms. Olivia had just finished securing the last window in her bedroom when a tremendous crack of thunder shook the house. She gasped, startled by the sudden violence of the sound. Outside, the sky had turned an eerie greenish black, and rain began to lash against the glass in horizontal sheets. She hurried downstairs to find Owen closing the heavy wooden shutters over the kitchen windows. "Cellar," he said tersely, taking her arm. "Now." "That's hail starting, and the wind's picking up." They had just reached the cellar door when the most terrifying sound Olivia had ever heard engulfed them, a roaring, freight train rumble that seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Tornado." Owen shouted, practically pushing her down the cellar stairs. He followed quickly, pulling the heavy door closed behind them. The small space was illuminated only by the lantern he hastily lit, casting long shadows on the earthen walls. The noise above was deafening, crashing, splintering, a horrible howling that made Olivia cover her ears in terror. Owen moved to her side, putting a protective arm around her shoulders as the storm raged above them. "It'll pass quickly," he assured her, though his face was tense in the lamplight. Olivia pressed against him, drawing comfort from his solid presence as the cellar floor seemed to vibrate beneath them. "What about the hands, the animals? The bunkhouse has a cellar too. They'll have taken shelter." His arm tightened around her as a particularly violent crash sounded overhead. "The livestock will find low ground. Cattle have good instincts about storms." For what seemed like hours but was probably only minutes, they huddled together in the cellar while nature's fury ravaged the world above. Olivia found herself clinging to Owen, her face buried against his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her cheek despite the chaos surrounding them. When the roaring finally began to recede, replaced by the steady drumming of heavy rain, Owen released her gently. "I think the worst has passed," he said, his voice sounding unnaturally loud in the sudden relative quiet. Olivia became acutely aware of how close they had been, how natural it had felt to seek shelter in his arms. She stepped back, smoothing her skirts with trembling hands. "Should we go up and check the damage?" "Let's wait a few more minutes to be sure," Owen advised, studying her face in the lamplight. "Are you all right? You're pale." Just shaken, Olivia admitted. I've never experienced anything like that before. Kansas storms take some getting used to, he said with a wry smile. Though that was a bad one, even by local standards. When they finally ventured upstairs, they found the house largely intact, though a window in the parlor had shattered, allowing rain to soak the rug beneath it. Outside was another story. In the dim light of dusk, they could see that one of the barn doors had been torn free and branches littered the yard. The bunkhouse appeared undamaged, much to their relief. I need to check on the men and the animals, Owen said, reaching for his slicker hanging by the door. Stay inside, there could be debris blowing around still. Be careful, Olivia urged, suddenly fearful of him going out into the storm-ravaged night. He paused, turning back to look at her with an expression that made her breath catch. I will, he promised softly. Left alone in the house, Olivia busied herself mopping up the water from the broken window and sweeping glass shards into a dustpan. Her hands still trembled slightly, not just from the terror of the storm, but from the lingering sensation of Owen's arms around her, the scent of him, leather and soap and man, still clinging to her senses. When he returned an hour later, soaked despite his rain gear, his report was better than they'd feared. The barn had suffered damage, but the animals were safe. The bunkhouse cellar had protected the ranch hands, though Tom had a cut on his forehead from falling debris as they'd rushed to take shelter. The biggest loss seems to be that old cottonwood by the creek, Owen said as he toweled his hair dry by the kitchen fire. Split right down the middle. Must have been 100 years old. Thank God it wasn't worse, Olivia said, pouring him a cup of coffee. Their fingers brushed as she handed him the cup, and she felt that now familiar flutter in her stomach at the contact. Owen seemed to feel it too, his eyes holding hers a moment longer than necessary. Thank you, he said, and she knew he meant for more than just the coffee. That night, Olivia lay awake listening to the rain still beating against the roof. The storm had changed something between them, broken down a barrier. In that moment of danger, when instinct overrode propriety, they had turned to each other naturally, like two halves of a whole seeking completion. She wondered if Owen was awake too, thinking of her as she was thinking of him. The idea both thrilled and terrified her. She was his housekeeper, dependent on him for her livelihood. He was a respected rancher still mourning a beloved wife. What future could there possibly be in these feelings growing between them? Yet as sleep finally claimed her, Olivia's last conscious thought was of Owen's face in the lantern light, looking at her as if seeing her, truly seeing her for the first time. The morning after the storm dawned clear and fresh, the air washed clean by the rain. Olivia rose early to prepare breakfast, finding Owen already in the kitchen, coffee brewing on the stove. You're up early, she observed, suddenly shy in his presence. Couldn't sleep, he admitted, pouring her a cup of the strong brew. Too much to think about, the damage from the storm. Olivia asked, accepting the coffee gratefully. Owen's eyes met hers over the rim of his cup. That, among other things. Before she could ask what he meant, the back door banged open and the ranch hands trooped in, bringing reports of fences down and cattle scattered across the south pasture. The moment of intimacy vanished as quickly as it had come, replaced by the practical necessities of the day. The next week was consumed with repairing storm damage. Owen and the hands worked from dawn until dusk, mending fences, reshingling the barn roof, and rounding up stray cattle. Olivia contributed by keeping meals ready at odd hours and packing food for the men to take with them into the fields. She also discovered, to her dismay, that her garden had been largely destroyed by the hail and wind. The neat rows of vegetables she'd tended so carefully were flattened, the plants broken and battered beyond recovery. Standing amidst the devastation, Olivia felt tears sting her eyes. It seemed a small loss compared to what might have happened, yet it represented so much of her work and hopes. We can replant, Owen's voice came from behind her. She turned to find him watching her, his expression gentle. It's not too late in the season for certain crops. I know, Olivia sighed, brushing at her eyes. It's silly to be upset about vegetables when we were all spared. Not silly, he disagreed, stepping closer. You put your heart into that garden, it's natural to mourn the loss. His understanding touched her deeply. Thank you, she said softly, for seeing that. I see a lot of things, Olivia, he replied, his voice equally soft. He reached out and tucked a strand of hair behind her ear, his fingers lingering against her cheek. More than you might realize. The moment stretched between them, charged with unspoken feelings. Then Hank called from the barn, needing Owen's help with a repair, and the spell was broken. Owen stepped back, his hand falling to his side. We'll get you seeds to replant, he promised, then turned and strode toward the barn, leaving Olivia breathless and confused in the ruins of her garden. That evening, after the men had gone to the bunkhouse, Olivia sat alone on the porch, enjoying the cooler air that had followed the storm. The moon rose full and bright over the ranch, silvering the landscape and casting long shadows across the yard. The sound of boots on the porch steps made her turn. Owen approached, carrying 2 glasses and a bottle. Thought you might like some company, he said, settling into the chair beside her. And a drink. It's been a long day. He poured amber liquid into the glasses, handing one to Olivia. It's bourbon, he explained. My father's favorite. I don't offer it often, but tonight seemed appropriate. Olivia sipped cautiously, the liquor burning a path down her throat. It's strong, she gasped. Owen chuckled, a warm sound in the darkness. Sip it slowly, it grows on you. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the only sounds the chorus of night insects and the occasional lowing of cattle in the distant pasture. I've been thinking about your garden, Owen said finally. Tomorrow I'll have Jake drive you into town to get new seeds and starts. Hobson at the Mercantile usually has late plantings for fall harvests. That's very kind, Olivia said, touched by his thoughtfulness. Not kind, practical, Owen corrected, though his tone was gentle. Your cooking has spoiled us all. We need those vegetables. Olivia smiled, appreciating his attempt to frame his consideration as simple practicality. It was becoming clear to her that Owen Farley was a man who felt deeply but struggled to express those feelings directly. I'll need to find sturdier stakes for the tomatoes, she mused. The old ones snapped like twigs in the wind. Use the hickory saplings by the creek, Owen suggested. They're flexible but strong, bend without breaking. Like people need to be out here, Olivia observed. Owen turned to look at her, his expression thoughtful in the moonlight. You've adapted well to ranch life, better than I expected for a town girl. I was raised in Boston, Mr. Farley, she reminded him, deliberately using his formal name to tease him. Concordia was hardly a metropolis to me, he laughed, the sound rich and unguarded. Fair point, Miss Keller. His smile faded into something more serious. Still, you faced fire and tornado in the span of a few weeks. Lesser spirits would have fled back east by now. I have nowhere to flee to, Olivia said honestly, and besides, I've found something here worth staying for. The words hung between them, more revealing than she'd intended. Owen set his glass down on the porch railing and turned fully toward her. What have you found, Olivia? He asked, his voice low and intent, heart pounding. Olivia met his gaze. Purpose, she said, belonging. She took a deep breath. Hope. Owen reached for her hand, his calloused fingers engulfing her smaller ones. I've found something too, he admitted. Something I thought was lost to me forever. He leaned forward, his intention clear in his eyes. Olivia closed the distance between them, her lips meeting his in a kiss that started gentle but quickly deepened with shared hunger. His hand came up to cradle her face, and she leaned into his touch, months of growing attraction crystallizing into this perfect moment. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Owen rested his forehead against hers. I've wanted to do that since I carried you from that burning cabin, he confessed. Maybe even from the first time I saw you in town last year, looking so determined as you handled those account books at Hobson's store. You noticed me back then, Olivia asked, surprised. I noticed everything about you, Owen said, but I wasn't ready, the timing wasn't right. And now? She whispered, suddenly afraid of his answer. Now, he said, brushing his lips against hers again, I think the timing is perfect. August gave way to September, and life at the Farley Ranch settled into a new pattern. Olivia's relationship with Owen deepened daily, their evenings spent in conversation and increasingly passionate embraces once the ranch hands had retired. They were discreet, mindful of her reputation, but the hands weren't blind. Knowing looks and good-natured teasing became commonplace, though always respectful. Olivia's replanted garden was flourishing, promising a good harvest before the first frost. The house had never looked better, with fresh curtains Olivia had sewn and wildflowers arranged in jars on every table. Even Owen's bedroom, which she had previously entered only to clean, now held touches of her presence: a book she'd been reading on the nightstand, a shawl draped over the chair. Yet they had not taken the final step in their relationship. Owen, for all his passionate kisses and tender words, remained honorable to a fault. "I won't dishonor you," he told her one night when their embrace had grown particularly heated. "You deserve better than stolen moments in the shadows." Olivia understood his restraint, even as it frustrated her. The ghost of Sarah still lingered in the house. In the careful way Owen sometimes pulled back just when Olivia thought he might finally give in to their mutual desire. She didn't resent the memory of his wife, how could she, when that capacity for deep love was part of what drew her to him? But she wondered if he would ever truly be free to love again. On a crisp morning in late September, Owen announced he needed to make a trip to Wichita to meet with cattle buyers. "I'll be gone 3 days," he told Olivia as they shared an early breakfast. 4 at most. "I'll miss you," she said simply, pouring him more coffee. Owen reached across the table to take her hand. "Come with me," he suggested, his eyes serious. "We could visit my sister and her husband. Margaret's been wanting to meet you since I wrote to her about you." Olivia's heart leapt at the implication that he'd written to his sister about her, that he wanted to introduce her to his family. "Are you sure? What would people think?" "That I'm courting you properly," Owen said, his thumb tracing circles on her palm, "which I am, or trying to anyway." Pleasure warmed Olivia from the inside out. "Then yes, I'll come with you." The journey to Wichita took a full day by train, giving them rare, uninterrupted time together. In the private compartment Owen had secured, they talked more freely than they ever had at the ranch, sharing stories of their childhoods and dreams for the future. "I never thought I'd run cattle," Owen admitted, watching the Kansas landscape roll by outside the window. "I wanted to be a lawyer like my uncle in St. Louis, even started studying with him one summer." "What changed your mind?" Olivia asked, fascinated by this glimpse of a different Owen than the capable rancher she knew. "My father fell ill," he explained. "Mother wrote that she needed me home. I intended to go back to St. Louis after he recovered, but..." He shrugged. "The ranch gets in your blood, and then I met Sarah at that harvest dance and my future seemed set." He spoke of his late wife without the shadow that had once accompanied her name, Olivia noticed. It was as if having Olivia in his life had somehow healed that old wound, allowing him to remember Sarah with fondness rather than pain. "What about you?" Owen asked, turning the conversation. "Did you always see yourself ending up in Kansas?" Olivia laughed. "Hardly. I was supposed to marry the son of my father's business partner. It was practically arranged since childhood." Owen raised an eyebrow. "What happened?" "I refused," Olivia said simply. "Harold was perfectly pleasant, but the thought of spending my life with him made me feel..." She searched for the right word. "Trapped. When my parents decided to head west, I was relieved. It meant I could escape the expectations of Boston society." "And now, do you ever regret leaving civilization behind?" Olivia considered the question seriously. "Sometimes I miss certain comforts: libraries, theater, shops with the latest fashions. But no, I don't regret it, especially now." Owen's smile was slow and warm. "Especially now," he agreed, lifting her hand to press a kiss against her knuckles. Margaret Farley Wells was a female version of her brother Tall, with the same striking blue eyes and direct manner. She welcomed Olivia with genuine warmth to the handsome home she shared with her banker husband in Wichita's most prosperous neighborhood. "Owen's letters have been full of you," Margaret said as she showed Olivia to the guest room. "I haven't seen him this animated in years." Olivia blushed, uncertain how to respond to such frankness. Margaret laughed, patting her arm. "Don't worry, I won't embarrass you further." "But I'm glad he found you, Olivia." My brother deserves happiness. I care for him very much, Olivia admitted softly. I can see that, Margaret replied with approval, and he clearly adores you. Now freshen up and come down for tea. I want to hear all about how you're managing that ramshackle house of his. The 3 days in Wichita passed quickly. While Owen conducted his business, Margaret took Olivia shopping, insisting on purchasing a beautiful emerald green dress for her. For the harvest dance next month, Margaret explained, every woman needs one impractical, beautiful gown. On their final evening, Albert Wells hosted a small dinner party, introducing Owen and Olivia to several prominent Wichita families. Olivia, wearing her new green dress, felt Owen's admiring gaze follow her throughout the evening. You look beautiful, he murmured as they stood alone for a moment on the Wells' veranda. Every man in there is envying me tonight. I doubt that, Olivia demurred, though pleasure at his compliment warmed her. I don't, Owen said firmly. He hesitated, seeming uncharacteristically nervous. Olivia, there's something I need to ask you. Her heart began to race. Yes. The veranda door opened before he could continue, and Albert Wells stepped out. There you two are. Margaret's about to play the piano, and she insists you both come listen. Owen's jaw tightened in frustration, but he nodded politely. Of course, we'll be right in. The moment was lost, and whatever Owen had wanted to ask remained unspoken as they returned to the party. The train ride back to Concordia was quieter than their journey to Wichita had been. Olivia sensed Owen had something on his mind, but he seemed unable or unwilling to share it. When they arrived at the station, Jake was waiting with the wagon to drive them back to the ranch. Everything all right at home? Owen asked as they loaded their luggage. Fine, boss, Jake assured him, though we'll all be glad to have Miss Keller's cooking again. Hank's beans and bacon 3 nights running wasn't exactly a treat. The familiar routine of the ranch enveloped them once more. Olivia prepared a welcome home supper that the hands devoured with enthusiasm, and the evening passed pleasantly with stories of their time in Wichita. It was only later, when the house was quiet and Olivia was preparing for bed, that Owen sought her out. He knocked softly on her bedroom door, entering when she called permission. I needed to see you alone, he explained, standing somewhat awkwardly just inside the doorway. There's something I've been trying to ask you since Wichita. Olivia's pulse quickened. I'm listening, she said, hoping her voice sounded calmer than she felt. Owen crossed to where she stood by the window, taking both her hands in his. Olivia Keller, he began, his voice steady despite the nervous tension she could feel in his hands. I know this might seem sudden to others, though it doesn't to me. From the moment I carried you from that burning cabin, I think I knew you were meant to be in my life permanently. He took a deep breath. I love you. I want to marry you if you'll have me. Make this house truly yours, make a family with you, grow old with you on this land. Joy burst through Olivia like sunrise, bright and all-encompassing. Yes, she whispered, tears blurring her vision. Yes, Owen, I'll marry you. His smile was radiant as he pulled her into his arms, kissing her with a passion that left her breathless. When they finally parted, he reached into his pocket and withdrew a small velvet box. This was my mother's, he explained, opening it to reveal a sapphire ring surrounded by tiny diamonds. She left it to me before she died, said I should give it to the woman who brought light back into my life. He slipped it onto Olivia's finger, a perfect fit. She would have loved you. I wish I could have known her, Olivia said, admiring the ring that now symbolized their future together. We'll tell our children about her, Owen promised. About your parents, too. Keep their memories alive, our children. The words sent a shiver of anticipation through Olivia. A family of her own with this man she had come to love so deeply. When? She asked. When should we marry? As soon as possible, Owen replied without hesitation. I've wasted enough time already. Unless you want a big wedding, Margaret would help with arrangements. Olivia shook her head. I don't need anything elaborate, just you and perhaps our closest friends. Reverend Collins could perform the ceremony here at the ranch. Next Saturday, Owen suggested, clearly eager to make her his wife. Laughing at his impatience, Olivia agreed. Next Saturday it is. News of their engagement spread quickly through Concordia. The townspeople, who had watched their relationship develop with approving interest, were effusive in their congratulations. Mrs. Thompson at the dress shop insisted on creating a special wedding dress for Olivia, refusing payment. "Consider it a wedding gift," she said firmly. "It's not every day one of Concordia's most eligible bachelors finally decides to settle down again." Margaret arrived from Wichita 3 days before the wedding, bringing with her trunks of linens, silver, and other household items. "Wedding presents," she explained, hugging Olivia warmly, "and a few things of Mother's I thought should stay in the family." The day before the wedding, Owen reluctantly moved to the bunkhouse at Margaret's insistence. "It's bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony," she scolded her brother. "One night away from Olivia won't kill you." The wedding day dawned clear and bright, a perfect early October Saturday. Margaret helped Olivia dress in the simple but elegant white gown Mrs. Thompson had created, arranging wildflowers in her upswept hair. "You look beautiful," Margaret said, stepping back to admire her work. "Owen won't know what hit him." Downstairs, the parlor had been transformed. Autumn flowers decorated every surface, and chairs borrowed from neighbors had been arranged in rows. Through the window, Olivia could see guests arriving, townsfolk from Concordia, neighboring ranchers, even a few of Margaret and Albert's friends from Wichita who had made the journey. "Are you ready?" Margaret asked, offering Olivia her bouquet of late-blooming roses from the garden. Olivia took a deep breath, feeling strangely calm despite the momentous step she was about to take. "More than ready," she assured her soon-to-be sister-in-law. The ceremony itself passed in a blur. Later, Olivia would remember fragments of Owen's face as she entered the parlor on Hank's arm, the old cowboy having offered to give her away. Reverend Collins's kind smile as he pronounced them husband and wife. The cool weight of the gold band Owen slipped onto her finger to join her engagement ring. Most of all, she would remember the kiss that sealed their vows, filled with promise and barely restrained passion. The guests' applause seemed distant as Owen whispered against her lips, "My wife." The celebration continued into the evening with food and drink flowing freely. A fiddler from town provided music, and the furniture was pushed aside for dancing. Owen held Olivia close during every waltz, seemingly unwilling to let her go now that she was finally, officially his. As twilight deepened into night, the guests gradually departed, wishing the newlyweds happiness with knowing smiles and, from the younger men, a few good-natured ribald comments that made Olivia blush. Margaret and Albert were the last to leave, returning to town to stay at the hotel before their journey back to Wichita the next day. "Be happy, both of you," Margaret said, embracing them. "And Owen, bring your bride to visit us at Christmas." "We'll be there," Owen promised, his arm firmly around Olivia's waist. Finally, they were alone. The house, their home now in truth as well as feeling, settled around them in companionable silence. "Mrs. Farley," Owen said, his voice husky with emotion and desire. "I've been waiting all day to get you alone." Olivia went willingly into his arms, her own need matching his. "Then don't wait any longer, Mr. Farley." Their wedding night was everything Olivia had dreamed of, tender at first, as Owen treated her with exquisite care, then passionate as she responded eagerly to his touch. In the sanctuary of their bedroom, they discovered each other fully at last, learning what pleased, what excited, what fulfilled. "I love you," Owen whispered against her skin again and again, as if he couldn't say it enough now that the words were finally free. "I love you, Olivia Farley." Afterward, lying in his arms as moonlight spilled across their bed, Olivia felt a completeness she had never known was possible. The journey that had brought her to this moment, from Boston to Kansas, from her parents' death to the fire that had destroyed her cabin, seemed now like a path that had always been leading here, to this man and this life. "What are you thinking?" Owen asked, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. "That sometimes tragedy leads to blessing," Olivia replied honestly. "If my cabin hadn't burned, we might never have found each other this way." Owen pulled her closer. "I've thought the same thing. When I saw the smoke that night, all I was thinking was that someone needed help. I had no idea I was riding toward my own future happiness. Do you believe in fate? Olivia asked, curious. I didn't used to, Owen admitted. After Sarah died, I couldn't imagine any divine plan that would include such suffering. But now, he kissed her forehead gently. Now I think perhaps everything happens for a reason, even the painful things. They shape us, prepare us for the joy to come. Olivia nodded against his chest, understanding completely. Like being forged in fire, she murmured. Exactly like that, Owen agreed. And we've both been through the fire, haven't we, and found each other on the other side, Olivia finished the thought, raising her face for his kiss. The years that followed were not without challenges. The winter of 1879 brought blizzards that threatened the herd and tested the ranch's resources. The summer of 1880 saw a drought that withered crops and dried creek beds to dust. Through it all, Owen and Olivia faced each difficulty together, their bond strengthening with every obstacle overcome. In the spring of 1881, their family grew with the birth of their son, James Owen Farley, named for both their fathers. Olivia's labor was difficult but ultimately successful, and when Owen placed their son in her arms for the first time, the look of wonder and gratitude on his face moved her to tears. "Thank you," he whispered, his voice choked with emotion. "For him, for everything." James was joined 2 years later by a daughter, Elizabeth Sarah, completing their family. The Farley Ranch prospered under Owen's management and Olivia's capable assistance. They added acreage, improved the breeding stock, and built a new, larger barn to replace the one damaged in the tornado. The house, too, expanded to accommodate their growing family. Owen added a nursery wing and a larger kitchen, fulfilling his promise to make improvements. But the heart of the home remained the same, the parlor where they had exchanged vows, the porch where they still sat on summer evenings watching their children play in the yard. On the 10th anniversary of the fire that had brought them together, Owen surprised Olivia with a special gift, a small wooden box carved with roses, nearly identical to the one that had contained her parents' mementos and been lost in the flames. "Open it," he urged, watching her face closely. Inside, nestled on velvet, lay a cameo brooch, not her mother's lost one, but similar in design and equally beautiful. "How did you find this?" Olivia asked, deeply touched by his thoughtfulness. "I described your mother's to a jeweler in Kansas City," Owen explained. "He found this one in St. Louis. It's not the same, I know, but I thought." Olivia silenced him with a kiss. "It's perfect," she assured him, "just like these 10 years have been." "Not perfect," Owen corrected with a smile. "Real, with real joys and real struggles, and I wouldn't trade a single day of it." As they stood together on the porch of the home they had built together, watching the sunset paint the Kansas sky in shades of gold and crimson, Olivia reflected on the journey that had brought them to this moment. From the terror of a burning cabin to the peace of a life shared, from strangers to lovers to family, it was a path she could never have imagined but would forever be grateful for. "What are you thinking about so intently?" Owen asked, slipping his arm around her waist. Olivia leaned into his embrace, still as solid and comforting as it had been the night he carried her from the flames. "I was thinking that sometimes the worst moments of our lives lead to the best," she said. "That night when my cabin was burning around me, I thought I had lost everything. I never imagined I was about to gain everything that truly mattered." Owen turned her to face him, his blue eyes still capable of making her heart race after all these years. "I found a treasure in that burning cabin," he said softly, "and I've been thankful every day since." As their lips met in a kiss that held all the passion of new love and all the depth of a decade shared, Olivia knew with absolute certainty that the fire that had once threatened to end her life had instead been the beginning of something far more precious, a love forged in flames, tested by time, and destined to burn bright for all their days to come. Their life together continued to flourish as the 19th century drew to a close. The Farley Ranch became one of the most successful operations in Kansas, known for its quality cattle and fair business practices. Owen's reputation as a skilled rancher and honest dealer spread throughout the state, bringing offers of partnership and expansion that he carefully considered with Olivia's counsel. Their children grew strong and capable in the wholesome ranch environment. James, with his father's height and his mother's thoughtful nature, showed a natural affinity for working with the animals. Elizabeth, spirited and bright, excelled in her studies with the tutor they brought to the ranch, announcing at 12 her intention to attend college back east someday. "She gets that determination from you," Owen teased Olivia as they discussed their daughter's ambitions one evening. "Perhaps," Olivia acknowledged with a smile, "but she gets her fearlessness from you." As Concordia grew from a small town into a proper city, Olivia became involved in community improvements, helping establish a proper library and advocating for better educational opportunities for all children in the area. Owen, though initially reluctant to enter politics, eventually served on the town council, where his practical approach and integrity earned him widespread respect. They faced sorrows as well as joys. Margaret died unexpectedly in the winter of 1895, leaving Owen grieving for his beloved sister. Olivia suffered a miscarriage the following year, a loss that left them both mourning what might have been. Yet these shared griefs, like the challenges before them, only strengthened the bond between them. "We weather the storms together," Owen would say during difficult times, echoing the night they had huddled in the cellar while the tornado raged above. "And we come out stronger on the other side." In 1903, 25 years after the fire that had brought them together, they hosted a grand anniversary celebration at the ranch. Friends and family gathered from near and far, including their son James and his new bride, who had taken over managing much of the ranch operations, and Elizabeth, home from her studies at Vassar College. As twilight fell, Owen led Olivia away from the festivities to the old cottonwood tree, by the creek, the one that had been split by lightning during that long-ago storm and had somehow survived, growing new branches from its wounded trunk. "I have something for you," he said, taking a small package from his pocket. Inside was a delicate silver locket. When Olivia opened it, she found a tiny photograph of them on their wedding day on one side and a recent portrait of their children on the other. 25 years, Owen said, his voice still strong though now touched with the silver that threaded his once dark hair. "The best years of my life, Olivia." "Mine too," she replied softly, her love for this man as fresh and vital as it had been in those first heady days of their courtship. "When I rode toward your burning cabin that night, I was just doing what anyone would do," Owen reflected, helping her fasten the locket around her neck. "I had no idea I was riding toward my destiny." "Destiny?" Olivia echoed, remembering their conversation on their wedding night so many years before. "Do you still believe in it?" "More than ever," Owen assured her, drawing her close. "How else can you explain how perfectly we fit together? How all the painful paths we walked led us to each other?" As they stood beneath the resilient old tree, the sounds of celebration drifting from the ranch house, Olivia thought of all they had built together, not just the prosperous ranch and the handsome house, but the life filled with love, purpose, and meaning. "That night in the fire," she said softly, "when I thought all was lost, I never imagined I was about to find everything I ever wanted but didn't know to wish for." "And I," Owen replied, his arms tightening around her, "never knew when I broke down that door that I was really breaking through to the rest of my life, the best part." Their lips met in a kiss that held all the wisdom of their years together and all the passion that had never dimmed. Above them, stars emerged in the darkening Kansas sky, as constant and true as the love they had forged from the flames of disaster and built into a lifetime of joy.